Good evening, everyone. This is Veer Maheshwar Charitable Trust, MS India, organizing daily international webinar series. This series is running from last 5 years, and the speakers are invited from India and abroad. We accept all the topics, so speakers are delivering their speeches every day on different topics as per their field of interest and research. Today, our Veer Maheshwar Charitable Trust Director, Veerbhadra Ganacharya present here. With his blessing, we will start today's webinar, international conference. Today we have invited the speaker, Natalie Treloar Madam, who is Alpha India Consultancy Sydney, who is from Alpha India Consultancy Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Her works related to the women empowerment, and today's topic is UN Women Peace and Security WPS agenda. She is Australian company director of Alpha India Consultancy as a senior fellow at the Indo-Pacific Studies Center IPSC and a senior analytic at the National Institute of Deterrence Studies NIDS and member of the Open Nuclear Network. She is today's speaker. Natalie is working on the matters of geopolitics and strategic alliances to achieve deterrence in the Indo-Pacific region. She enjoys working collaboratively with policymakers, diplomats, and scholars, and emerging leaders across the Indo-Pacific and globally to realize these ends. Natalie holds a Master of Strategic Studies in the Master of Business Administration from the Australian National University and Master of Engineering Management of a Bachelor's Degree of Science. She have participated and invited in so many conferences and speeches. We are fortunate that her study will benefit us because her work is very different about the UN Women Peace and Security WPS agenda. I welcome you, ma'am, from our all participants and our director, Dr. Veerbhadra Ganacharya, and I request you, you can start your speech. Thank you.
Thank you for having me this evening. Where I am, it's this evening. I'm very grateful to be here today. I'd like to talk about women, peace and security. It's slightly different from a deterrence topic, but how that ties into deterrence I think is really important. So I just have to make a quick disclaimer that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Australian government or any other organisation with which I may be affiliated. So today I'd like to talk about the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. I'd like to provide then some examples of women in peace and security and some of the other roles that exist in women's peace and security that we may or may not often think about, and then some concluding remarks and maybe what's next for India with their WPS agenda. So the United Nations Security Council UNSC Resolution 1325 was brought in on October 31st of 2000. The United and after years of advocacy, this marked the launch of what's known as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Global leaders committed to a new way of looking at conflict and peace beyond the warring parties and traditional power brokers, both dominated by men even today. Resolution 1325 acknowledges that women and girls are harmed by conflict in ways that are distinct, horrific, and must be stopped. It also establishes that women's meaningful participation in the peace processes is essential to preventing, ending, and recovering from conflict. This agenda also emphasises the vital role of women in conflict resolution and peace building, including their protection from violence and prioritising their needs in relief and recovery efforts. So there's 4 pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. These 4 pillars align gender equality and peace as shared goals and responsibilities. Firstly, there's prevention, where conflict should be avoided or ended wherever possible. Where there is gender equality, conflicts are less likely, and where there is conflict, parties must prevent all forms of violence against women and girls. The second pillar is protection, where the rights and the safety of women and girls must be protected. Considerations must be given for the ways in which they are impacted, especially by sexual violence. Thirdly, participation. All decisions about peace and security, from local councils to the international stage, must include women with equal and meaningful participation. Peace and security processes are more inclusive and therefore more legitimate and more durable. And finally, relief and recovery, where rebuilding after conflict or crisis, women and girls have specific needs, often are primary caretakers for children and elders. Women-led organisations play a vital role here, ensuring the safe access to food, water, hygiene products during conflicts and after the dust settles. Since the implementation of the resolution, there's been 9 additional resolutions added to the WPS agenda over the years, which fortified the pillars of prevention, protection, participation, relief and rehabilitation. So the progress to date, the structural and financial support for women peace builders remains significantly adequate. So this is where life-saving aid for women and girls are trapped in conflict. Women also remain underrepresented in formal negotiations, and gender equality in politics is far off, and many conflict-affected countries are lagging even further behind. In many parts of the world, efforts to suppress gender equality and undermine women's rights have intensified, and gender-based violence remains pervasive in conflict settings with structural barriers to accountability and justice. Australia has implemented a national action plan on women, peace and security. Our current plan is from 2021 to 2031, and this is what it looks like on the cover. And then it has a number of principles, and then it has a number of outcomes here, which are what's used to measure performance against as well. So roughly 107 countries have since developed a WPS National Action Plan. There are also regional ones for ASEAN and Indo-Pacific nations. In 2022, the Lowy Institute stated that India does not have a formal comprehensive national action plan for the UN Security Council's Women, Peace and Security agenda, which may result in an inconsistent approach that prioritises international peacekeeping contributions over domestic policy implementation. While India strongly supports gender equality in UN missions and promotes women in security, it has not yet adopted its localised framework. Geostrata has also recommended that India develop and implement a national action plan to ensure women's participation in conflict prevention, mediation, post-conflict reconciliation, and on internal and international peacekeeping. The second recommendation was to further train the self-help groups to be deployed in gender response teams, trained in trauma care, psychological support, sexual violence in zones vulnerable to conflict. And also the third recommendation was about women are becoming, so this is around the women's bodies increasingly becoming battlefields in domestic political conflicts, and that India should strengthen legal institutions and fast-track courts for addressing any sexual violence in conflict situations and ensure accountability and survivor-centred justice. The government should also entitle women membership in local peace-building committees, especially those overseeing post-conflict reconstruction initiatives in Manipur and other areas that face constant threats of violence, such as Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, it's not to say that India doesn't have a WPS agenda, it's just not formalised, and perhaps the formalisation of that may lead to better outcomes. But some of those measures that I've seen on the global stage, many countries may be performing better in other areas to other countries, and so then how do you measure against that? And I'd say that that's quite a difficult thing to compare countries against. But having it formalised may help India to sort of monitor its progress against that. So then I wanted to look at some examples of women in peace and security roles, and these are sort of the more sort of notable examples. So, for example, we had women playing key roles in driving Finland and Sweden's NATO bids for membership, where Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin and Swedish PM Magdalena Andersson steered their governments to apply as Russia's invasion of Ukraine shifted the security landscapes. This led to increased public support and increased female engagement in defence training as well. Another example of women in peace and security is Ukraine has stated that they cannot win the war against Russia without women involved in conflict. So here's some examples where this is a drone unit in Ukraine, and Ukrainian women have taken on central, multifaceted roles in the war against Russia, serving as active combatants, medics, and other sniper operators, with the number of women in the armed forces rising by 40% since 2021. Beyond the front lines, they lead humanitarian efforts, run businesses, and support families while facing significant risks of displacement, violence, and economic hardship. Another example is Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who stated Japan's right to collective self-defense. So her remarks regarding survival-threatening situation may be interpreted as meaning if China were to launch a military attack on Taiwan and US forces were deployed to the Taiwan Strait or elsewhere, Japan might exercise its right of collective self-defense and engage in some form of cooperation with US forces, which could include the use of military force. This interpretation does not deviate from the conventional position of the Japanese government. However, it was interpreted differently from China's point of view. But she's an example of someone that stood up for her country's right to self-defense. We also have examples of women in global governance and strategic deterrence. So here's some of the three women that I follow. I find these women very knowledgeable and helpful for like my work that I do in deterrence, because Australia doesn't have nuclear weapons. So when we talk and speak about deterrence, it's often really helpful to look at countries like India, Pakistan, and even Russia and China, and what their subject matter experts are providing in that area. But this is a very important role that these women play here as well. We've also got women in science and technology. So whether that sit behind nuclear energy or technology that needs to go in defence and peace and security. For example, we've got the IAEA Women for Nuclear Science, Education and Communications here at ANSTO in Australia. So there's a bunch of women there from around the world. And then also we've got, for example, military service, so where the Indian militaries here. In Australia, we also have women in special operations. And then another example of a role is the humanitarian protection and assistance, which is another vital role where these women and men also protect those affected by conflict and armed violence and promote the rules of war. They also ensure that the essential services and rights are preserved in conflict. And I thought I'd conclude with this sort of statement where nearly a quarter of a century after the Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted, women's full, equal and meaningful participation in building peace should be a norm and not an aspiration or an afterthought. And this was by the UN Secretary General. The importance of the women, peace and security agenda lies in its proven ability to create more durable peace, enhance conflict prevention and build more resilient societies. By including women's diverse experiences in all stages of peace building, from negotiations to post-conflict governance, empowering women leads to better policies, greater security for all, and more inclusive, sustainable outcomes, countering the devastating unequal impacts of conflict on women and girls, and addressing issues like gender-based violence. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether or not India is going to be implementing a national action plan sort of in line with those recommendations that I pointed out earlier. And I'm happy to take any questions. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I mean, I found that having really good male leaders has also been very supportive in my role. So I began my career in the pharmaceutical industry and in a laboratory before I transitioned to defence-based roles, and also roles that I've had with the National Institute for Deterrence Studies and the Indo-Pacific Studies Centre. Like, the importance of male leadership has also been very useful as well. I haven't had as many female leaders, probably because there has been lacking female leaders, but the male leaders that I've had have always been very supportive of the roles that I've held, and I think that also helps women to be successful in these roles that contribute to a nation's peace and security and prosperity. I haven't personally been to India. My mother's been to India, but yeah, it's somewhere where I'd like to go and visit, because I think it's a much different experience when you experience a country and you see it on the ground in person. It can be a completely different experience. And it helps you to understand the challenges and also to engage with the local people and understand their perspectives and views. So how do I manage it personally? Sorry? Like my workload? Well, I have a paid job as well, and then I volunteer with the National Institute for Deterrent Studies and the Indo-Pacific Studies Centre. I guess it's something that I do in my spare time as well, and I make time for that. Yes, my undergrad was chemistry. Yes. I have. So recently I was working for a company that was more in the science and technology side of defence and energy, the energy sector as well. But I haven't been so hands-on with that side of things. However, I do find that my science enables me to understand the science to warfare and war. And then I've had to sort of learn and understand the art side of strategic studies, and I formalised that through my studies at the ANU in the Master of Strategic Studies. But I've been working with defence since 2010, so either in industry with companies like Thales and BAE, or with the Department of Defence. Often I've contracted to them. I've also worked across other government departments as well. So say, for example, the Department of Infrastructure. And so I've had a broad experience. Thank you.
Very good afternoon, Dr. Betkar. I have one question with ma'am. Ma'am, it was a wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and basically the crisp presentation. But as you were talking about the women harassment, don't you think that the people are more gender stereotypes and that is contributing in women harassment, and how we can stop it?
Well, I think it's going to vary, I think, in different countries and different workplaces as well. I think all women have experienced some level of it at some point in their lives. But I think that having, for example, a women peace and security agenda, or and India formalising that, could also help to create that focus on trying to eliminate that. But then it also does come down to, say, workplaces. So in Australia, and I'm not sure what it's like in India, but in Australia we have things like like law around that sort of thing as well, around harassment, but also then the companies and or government departments are meant to have policies around that too, to try and prevent that. But often it comes down to even training and trying to come up with simple examples of what does that maybe look like. I remember one of the first trainings I ever had, which was actually at Pfizer, one of the pharmaceutical companies, and they gave some really simple examples. It was basically like if you think this would make someone like another person feel uncomfortable, then don't do it. Essentially, like you probably shouldn't take that step. And I think that's a really simple example where that boundary is if that might make that person feel uncomfortable. So especially in a workplace, then it's best to just not do that and to treat people with respect and things like that as well. But I think policies and having frameworks in place and law are really important to preventing any of that.
Thank you, ma'am. But how we can change the mindset of the people, as worldwide we are saying, looking at this gender bias and gender stereotype. So at very early stage, how we can break the mindset of the people so that we can create a harmonious environment for everyone rather being a gender biased.
Yeah, I think that even comes down to parenting from a very young age, and then how people are brought up in, say, schools, and just how do you set those examples or norms in society so that I mean, and I can only talk sort of more from an Australian perspective, but having the laws here means that then there is punishment, but then how do you get those norms forming in from a young age right through to our adult life, really, essentially? I think that's really important. But I think, it's a global issue, and in some places it's slightly better than others. But yeah, we probably should be doing more as a society to sort of think about how we treat people.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie ma'am, and thank you to our respected resource person, Dr. Sukriti madam, discussing and completing this webinar with a fruitful discussion. I am thankful to all participants, those who are joined here, and I am thankful to our today's Natalie resource person who has delivered the topic Women, Peace and Security. We congratulate her about her contribution in this field for making the peace. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bector, and thank you, everyone. It was really lovely to be online with you all. And I look forward to maybe seeing India's WPS agenda plan potentially.
Yeah, you can please see the agenda of India visit, and then you can inform us so that we can try to meet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.